Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining Pont De Politique once again. Umtungo uyengwayo malingi, undima unkumbuzo uyanamkela. Kwenye yezinkqubo zanamhlanje. I'm saying this, thank you very much for joining us. We started a little bit late today, but because of various things that were taking place this afternoon, so we are unfortunately starting a little bit late, but we apologize for that. But welcome, uthando lwethu kadlanga igama uyengwayo umalingi undima unkumbuzo uyanamkela once again to this program of Pont De Politique. You would remember that last week we were unable to broadcast live because of the unfortunate incident that took place. Unfortunately, I fell ill just 2 hours before the program, and the technicians, I think they communicated that and they were able to reach many of you. And unfortunately, that episode of last week could not take place, and we apologize for that. But we're back again today in the month of September. In South Africa, this month is known as the month of heritage. So if it is your first time joining Pont De Politique, make sure that you follow us there on YouTube. Here is our platform at Pont De Politique, at Pont De Politique on YouTube. And we are also available on Twitter. We are also available on Facebook at Pont De Politique as well. But also we are available on Instagram, which is another platform. And lastly, we are available on TikTok. So make sure that you follow us and ensure that you are part and parcel. You are not missing out on any interesting conversation that we are normally having on this wonderful platform. And I know, even if I say it myself, Pont De Politique is one of the richest political platforms in South Africa. Every Sunday, we're dishing bars. We're dishing political bars, political information, and political history. Before we get into the topic of today, you must understand that over the weekend, the monarch of the United Kingdom has died, and majority of the media has been focused extensively on that. Some people were making the critique, and others were making their own submissions. And unfortunately, for us on Pont De Politique, while we are using a Eurocentric name that means a bridge to politics, we're not interested in the conversation of the death of the Queen of the United Kingdom, even though we understand that she has set and presided over an empire of criminality, an empire of murderous empire, and so on and so forth. So we thought it is most important that we must actually engage on things that are more directed at us as an African people, things that relate specifically to our heritage, things that relate specifically to our interest as an African people, notwithstanding the fact that for some people it might be that the death of the United Kingdom Queen might be of interest. I'm sure majority of people have been bombarded with those stories. We are not interested in that particular lie. But we are an educational program that seeks to further educate extensively, and so that when we move forward, whether we participate in any type of political movement or political party or political decision, we make that participation from an informed position. So many years ago, the PAC established what would be named the AZANIan People's Liberation Army. It was on the 11th of September 1961 that the PAC established this movement, this army wing. And over the course of the time, this has been seen as an important and part and parcel of the vehicles towards liberation movement, albeit they failed to achieve the actual liberation for South Africa. Some people might believe that, or might say that, actually, no, they did not fail. The type of setup that we are living in currently is liberation. Well, it is for them to say. It is also for them to argue. It is also for them to accept that. So, on the 11th of September 1961, the Pan-Africanist Congress established what was called the AZANIA People's Liberation Army, APLA. And it was disbanded on the eve of the elections in 1994. And ever since then, we have, in the post-democratic society, lived with some members of that movement, that guerrilla movement, some of them integrated into the South African National Defence Force and police and all other security agencies. So today we are actually celebrating the 61st year of the establishment of that particular movement, or that guerrilla army, if one were to say it. So if you are watching with us, I want you to share as much as possible, because we are going to be making some very critical arguments. We're not going to be talking about whether there were successes, failures, or whatever. We just want to bring a certain dimension in the conversation. Over 60 years, people have understood APLA the way that they have understood it. And I want to bring it into this conversation, how I also understand it, and how I have done a research, trying to see how did APLA came about. But before we can even go further to discuss that and engage on this, the metamorphosis, I'm calling it the metamorphosis of APLA from POQO, which majority of people argue like that. Before I make my submission, I want to take you back a little bit for those who were there in those days. I want to take you to one of their military camps for a few minutes, so that you can understand what we will be talking about. I'm sharing this video. Just enjoy it for a few minutes. We will be playing APLA in the military camp, just to give you a feel of what they were doing. we're picking up that we are having a slight a technical problem a little bit in putting across that that video that we wanted to show at the Bacamayo military camp. So we are experiencing just that slight difficulty there, but I'm hoping that before the end of this program, we will be able to further play it if it is not playing correctly. But what we wanted to do and what we wanted to show you guys was how these the APLA combatants were embarking on their parades, on the work that they were doing as they were being trained for what you would refer to as a liberation movement or liberation fight. But also at the same time, we must understand that on the 12th of September, I'm raising these things as quick as possible so that I can get into the essence of my conversation. On the 12th of September, the legendary Steve Biko of the Black Consciousness Movement was murdered by the racist apartheid colonial apartheid government. And this is one of the periods in the African and the Black resistance struggle that is important. And I'm saying these things in line with what I had said earlier, that we need to focus more on ourselves rather than utilizing what is being fed to us by the media to give us what they would want us to consume. Over the past week, you have seen what was the majority of the consumption. So I'm going to ask you guys, those that are watching, those that will be watching, make sure that you interact with me on this conversation, because I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your views, and I want you to challenge me as well. The first thing is this: majority of the people in the post-apartheid South Africa, especially those that are our viewers in this platform, they do not know that there was other liberation movements that embarked on a military struggle against the apartheid regime. There were others, and but unfortunately, because of how the structure of public memory is being presented in the post-apartheid South Africa, you would tend to find that the majority of the things that are being spoken about are spoken about around the history of the ANC's Umkhonto weSizwe, and sometimes you would find APLA, and sometimes you would then find AZANIA. But most of the time, it's only for those people who do researches that are able to even pick up that there was what you would call an African resistance movement, which was also participating in a military struggle against the apartheid regime. As I was looking up, I thought I wanted to see if I have the book on with me, the book on the MK's on the ANC's MK. I would have loved to show many of you this particular book. And unfortunately, there has been so much written extensively about that particular movement, and not extensively about the others. So you had the APLA, which was established by the PAC. You then had the Umkhonto weSizwe, established by the ANC. You then had the African Resistance Movement, and then later you had AZANIA, which was established by Black Consciousness Movement. So you did not only have only two, or you did not only have only one in the case of Umkhonto weSizwe. So whomever that teaches you that type of information or that type of history is incorrect or is hiding something for your knowledge. So I want majority of those that are part and parcel of our viewers. Make sure that you go and dig and understand that ARM movement, it was also accepting some black and white people. So it did have some black people, and it also had some white people. Same as with the ANC, it also had some black people and white people. Also with the PAC, it also had black and white people in its formation. Albeit, I want to say that they were not that many in the PAC, but the PAC never focused extensively on this issue of the race question, whether because they understood everybody to be human race, and they were arguing that we must understand everybody from a human race, but there is a qualification for a person to become an African. That is a story for another day. But what I want to engage on is the heritage of AZANIA People's Liberation Army. Majority of people, and now this is where I'm going, and these are my arguments that I'm going to make. Majority of people are arguing that, and have always been informed that APLA metamorphosed, or APLA comes from POQO. And I argue that that is not the case. That is my first, my thesis statement. APLA does not come from POQO. It did not metamorphose from POQO. It metamorphosed from something else. And secondly, over the 60 years of the formation, we are on the 61st year today. And I thought it is important that let us put it in the public domain so that we can begin as Africanists, as Africans, historians, as scholars, political scientists, and philosophers, if one were to say, to begin to engage whether this thesis that APLA did not metamorphose from POQO is a correct thesis. Where is it coming from? Secondly, I want to argue that POQO is not a militia. POQO was not an armed wing of the PAC, but POQO is PAC, or POQO was PAC. This is my second thesis. And I want you, as I'm going through these things, I want you to be part and parcel of this conversation. We're going to take your comments as much as we can take them. Please make sure that you interact with me on this conversation, because I want us to have this legacy, this heritage. Let it be refocused. And my third thesis is that the argument that POQO was the metamorphosed or gave birth to APLA did not come from the PAC people, did not come from APLA people, but it came from outside. These are my 3 points that I want to argue. Firstly, APLA did not metamorphose from POQO. 2, POQO is not a militia, or was not a militia of the PAC. 3, the thinking that APLA metamorphosed, that means it changed from POQO to APLA. It did not come from the PAC itself, or from the members of the PAC itself. It came from outside, those who were interpreting what was transpiring in the PAC. I'm doing a research, and my dissertation is extensively on AZANIA People's Liberation Army. So whatever that I'm imparting on forms part of my work, and it is something that I'm engaging on. And I've used a majority of sources to ensure that I build on this argument, and I build on this, and I read this thing extensively. Most people in the PAC, or those who have read the PAC document, one of them people who are being regarded as I'm sorry for that, people who are being regarded as authority on the PAC. You've got the likes of Professor Tom Lodge. You've got the likes of Professor Kwandiwe Kondo, and so on and so forth. These people have been are regarded as authorities, scholarly authorities on the PAC, and I want to challenge that. I'm challenging that as a young and aspiring a scholar in this particular field of memory, with these arguments that I'm making. Why am I saying what I'm saying? First of all, for me to be able to answer the first thesis question that says that POQO, APLA did not metamorphose from POQO, I have to respond to I have to put to rest the second thesis, which says that POQO is not militia of the PAC. First and foremost, I'm starting with that. Do you believe that POQO is the militia of the PAC, and why do you say that? I do not believe so. And what I have picked up is that that is not the case. One, in the establishment of the PAC in 1959, majority of the sources and the scholars, if you dig deep into the archives of South Africa, you're picking up that there is a conversation that is taking place, even though there's no argument amongst it, that the PAC, especially in the areas of Kwalanga, where it was having a very strong hold, there was a question that seems to have been posed. This question was posed on the understanding that okay, one source, one reading is saying and is telling us this source is a former liberation fighter as well. It's on this book. He says on this particular book that there was a conversation that was taking place when Sobukwe was addressing the people in Kwalanga at the square. There was a question that was posed to him. Okay, now that we have established this new Pan-Africanist Congress, now there is another Congress that is available. How do we separate this Congress to the other? That is one source. One source is telling us that. Uthi ke umqashe xa ephendula uthi kwavela umuntu wathi singama Afrika poqo thina. That means that's how he tells us. That's where the name Ama Afrika poqo came about. I want to use correct English, even though it came with a boat. I want to use correct English. But as a definer, in relation to the Charterist Congress, let me say it like that. As a definer, they said, Bangama Afrika poqo. That is one source. One source says that. The other source says that there is a conversation. This source also, Utatu Malcolm Gyan, another veteran and a stalwart in the PAC. He might rectify. He might tell if I'm misrepresenting that understanding. He also says that there was an author who was writing especially around the border region. He used the understanding at the time. There was what I think Ethiopia, I think so. Ethiopia poqo or yeah, I think so. I think it was Ethiopia poqo. But if I'm mistaken on this, it's just that I do not have my notes in front of me. But those he wrote, and he then put into the public domain the name of Chini to separate this group from that one, the Charterist group, the one that focuses on multiracial group or multiracial ideology. They have this essence, Efananoba, bafana nama-Ethiopia POQO, kodwa bona bangama-Africa POQO. So there is another source that comes and brings us start. But also at the same time, you've got an author, a European author by the name of Strauss. He tells us that even before the establishment of the PAC in 1959, he says that amongst the Africanist group, the name POQO was utilized. The Africanist group, they had utilized that wording of Bangama Africa POQO. So when you look at all these and when you begin to ask the stalwarts of the PAC, and you want to get the sense as to what was POQO per se, you begin to find the sense from the stalwarts, from the sources, and also from majority of the people who are reading and understanding this. You are picking up that there is an understanding that the organization, the PAC itself, was known as POQO, especially in the Xhosa speaking areas around the Langa or the Langa areas. I think that is one aspect of understanding that the emanation. We might disagree on how the name POQO came about, but the name POQO was referring to the Pan-Africanist Congress. Some people are arguing, or even further arguing, that those people who were especially semi-illiterate in the Langa area, who were members of the PAC, who could not understand extensively the name, or who could not say this long name, Pan-Africanist Congress, they opted for using the shorter version, but I didn't think POQO. Now you've got another source, also in coming from as a stalwart of the PAC as well. He also says the same thing, that from their understanding, when the PAC was banned after the Sharpeville massacre, let me start here. Everybody knows that the PAC led the Sharpeville massacre. The strongest areas of Sharpeville massacre, or let me use the correct scholarly term, non-violent positive action campaign. It is non-violent positive action campaign adopted from the Nkrumahist ideology in Ghana. The strong areas that embarked on this was Sharpeville, which was led by Nyakane Tsolu. It was also in Kwalanga a few days later after the 21 itself. Areas that were not strong in that during that positive and non-violent positive action campaign. Pretoria, which was led by Ndaden Todibe. There was the Umingandandana around the area of where Prof. Sobukwe was at, and other areas. But what came to become and known as the Sharpeville massacre, led by Nyakane Tsulu in the Vaal, led to the banning of the PAC and the ANC and the Communist Party of South Africa. These two organizations that I'm referring to, they were banned as a as part and parcel of the problem. Basically, they were banned as part and parcel of the problem. Now, as the organization was operating as a banned organization, one source says that as they understood that at the time the PAC was banned, whenever they would embark on political programs, one of those programs was the Paarl Revolt, the Mbashe, and so on and so forth. When they were getting arrested, when they said they were part of POQO, they realized that they get out of court scot-free, because at the time there was no organization that was banned as POQO. The only organization that was banned, the only name of the organization that was banned was the Pan-Africanist Congress and the ANC and the Communist Party and whatever else one can talk. But I'm not interested in those. I'm talking about specifically the issue of the PAC. So Professor Shabalala speaks and says this therefore name was therefore adopted strategically, one, by the people who understood that we are getting scot-free when we are referring to ourselves as POQO. Up until the racist colonial apartheid regime decided to establish a Snyman Commission, because now the PAC using the POQO name in the form of POQO, the PAC in the form of POQO, especially around Kwalanga, it began to attack, because there was this thinking that was adopted to say by 1963 we must be liberated, and therefore the liberation can only be done as it is going to be achieved by armed struggle. So by 62, the Pal uprising, the Ntlonza uprising, the Komani, and the others and many others that took place, they led to the apartheid regime to actually want to go and understand Yindoni lo POQO. What is this thing of UPOQO? Now, once the Snyman Commission released its report, I think it was on the 8th of March 1963, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was 1962, 63. When they released the report, Snyman Commission, amongst the findings, he said, the people who have addressed the POQO rallies are the same people who have addressed the PAC rallies. The money or the subscription fee that is paid into the POQO grouping is the same amount of money that is paid in the PAC. The slogans and the thinking that is taking place in the POQO grouping is the same as the thinking that is taking place in the banned organization, which is the PAC. And for that reason, he then said, no, this is the same thing. This is the same organization. And the acting president at the time immediately went out and did a press briefing and acknowledged that. And it was true, because PAC was POQO and POQO was PAC. I'm going to stop it at this level, because we might not have so much time to engage on this, but I want you guys, if you are able to take part in this conversation, make sure that you ask the questions, you pose whatever that you want to pose on me, so that I can take you through. Now, let us go back. Now that we have made an understanding of how does the POQO and the PAC link, if you look at 1962, when the Northern Transvaal, which is the Pretoria area, all those people who were non-Xhosa speaking, when they began to embark on the very same processes, activism or activities that were similar to those that were taking place in the Cape, they never said they were POQO. They continue to refer to themselves as PAC, because they understood that POQO was PAC. When you see that the arrest of Abu Tatumakshinasi, the arrest of Abu Dikgang Musineke in Atteridgeville, and so on and so forth. So you pick this up, you understand that there was no difference from their understanding that POQO was PAC. So POQO, in the understanding of the PAC, was always the PAC. It was not a militia or anything else, but it was the PAC embarking on a military struggle using the very same organization. And I'm going to tell you what were they utilizing. Before the non-violent positive action campaign, PAC established what you would call a task force, an Africanist task force. An Africanist task force was established for those who are readers of the Nation of Islam. I always refer to it as from that perspective. Go and look at the Nation of Islam, how the Nation of Islam was established. Nation of Islam is an organization, but also it had subsidiaries or auxiliaries. One of their auxiliaries is called the Fruit of Islam. And the Fruit of Islam was the one that provides discipline, and it protects the organization, it protects the leadership, and so on and so forth. On the day that the great day where Malcolm X showed his power in Harlem one evening, the Fruit of Islam was the one that was present there to make and show the strength of the Nation of Islam. So the PAC, in my reading of the PAC, I saw that there was this establishment of the task force. And these task forces were established in each PAC branch or cell, if you want to call it. And these task forces had younger people. And majority of these younger people who were part and parcel of the task force, most of them, they wanted to fight, to go and embark in a military struggle. Immediately after the adoption, I'm saying the adoption of the armed struggle after the Sharpeville massacre, in Lesotho, the PAC leadership had said that it is going to take part. It is going to take part in military struggle. It is going to do an armed struggle. But now, all the representatives and coordinators or chairpersons or leaders of task forces who were given instructions at Lesotho in 61 at the time, they were told that go and recruit 100,000 or 10,000, 10,000 or 100,000 of young people to go abroad and be part and parcel of training, which they are going to come back into the country and embark on what you would refer to as an armed struggle. And it was chosen specifically in that, some call it indaba, some call it a meeting. It was accepted in that meeting. I'm going to use the word meeting. It was accepted in that meeting that the task force, which was established before the 1960 non-violent positive action campaign, it reads, we must recruit 100,000 young people in South Africa to go abroad so that they can be trained for armed struggle. And we are going to use the task force as the conduit towards that. And from this reading, we are basically seeing, therefore, in one area, you had leaders of task force, especially Kwalanga, you had leaders of task force. In the border area, there were leaders of task force. Some of the names you might know it better. Abo Tatu Chako. Here in Pretoria, at a later stage, a default, I think it was Ntate Khalabe Masemula, who was the leader of task force, and the other leaders of task force in various areas, in various branches or cells. So this was then the vehicle that was to drive this particular armed struggle. And this task force, which is a task force, the name explains it, which was part and parcel of the PAC, POQO, had these young people who decided to embark on these radical violence. Professor Kwandi will call them racist attacks. I don't know whether that is correct. He regards them as racist attacks. So these task force members would go and move from areas to areas to go and attack, because they were implementing the next phase of what you would refer as the armed struggle. This happened in Paarl, this happened in Tlonze, this happened in areas up until there were people who were even arrested in the place where you call in Duncan Village at the Pan-African Motors, garage katata Uvuyani Umgaza. So you've got now this understanding that, yes, if you look at these task forces that were established in these cells, the task force itself, then it had a supreme, let me call that supreme leader, or a commander, a task force commander. This task force commander was commanding other task force members at the cell level. There was an agreement that was agreed upon that. And it was these task forces that were implementing the decision, the armed struggle of the PAC. It was these task forces that were implementing the armed struggle of POQO, POQO being PAC. It was not POQO that was separate, which was a militia. And now you see with the person who is being appointed as the head of the task force, Ustalwat Undandal. And this becomes the first commander of APLA when APLA, okay, when the PAC went to train in China and other parts of the world to come and rebrand itself, give itself a new name. So what I'm trying to give to you, the viewers, is that firstly, POQO is the PAC. POQO is not separate from the PAC, is not an armed wing. Secondly, the task force is the conduit, is the vehicle. I'm using this word, is the vehicle that drives. It was agreed upon by the leadership of the PAC that it would be the driver of the PAC's military wing or military struggle. Yeah, armed struggle. It was going to be that driver. And these task forces in different areas, there were task forces in Pretoria, Northern Transvaal at the time. There were task forces in the border region, which included Monti, East London, King Williamstown, and Kong. There were task forces in the Cape, which majority of those task forces, they would move from Cape to the Transkei. So you get an understanding that actually the members of the PAC were also members of the task. Let me put it correctly. Members of the PAC were members also of the task force, but some members of the task forces were younger because there was a political leadership, especially in Kualanga, and then there was this bottom level, this level of the task force leadership. So if you read these sources, if you read these archives, you are able to pick up that actually the PAC, if you read properly, the PAC is POQO from the understanding of the stalwarts of the PAC. And you are also picking up that the task force was the driver, was the implementer of these armed military actions. But then my third thesis, which was arguing that this question or this point that argues that POQO is the militia or is a military, was the military wing of the PAC. It does not come from the PAC. Yes, you pick it up, but unfortunately the problem of scholarship is that most people don't want to go against the grain, something that I am trained to do, something that I am part and parcel of. My dissertation is a dissertation that is reading the archives in reverse. I am going against the grain. So if there's a historical narrative, I read the historical narrative, try to understand we call it counter narrative. Now, when you look at this understanding, one of the very same or the very first people who've written about the PAC or UPOQ, let's call it UPOQ, was Tom Lodge. Tom Lodge is the one that brings in this seed that POQO was a militia, was a separate entity of the PAC. He does not engage on the argument that POQO is PAC. I'm not sure what are the reasons. It could be that he was still writing at the time of apartheid, and therefore he did not have access to the sources, the primary sources, in the case of people who were part and parcel of the movement itself. So you find, therefore, this thinking in Tom Lodge's book, but also you find it also in this book again. I'm referring to it. Comrade Tammy Kaplaki has written some chapters on this book. You find this on this thinking, but also if you look at Tom Lodge's work, you would pick it up. You would pick it up there. In some of these sources, to give credit to Dr. Hlongwane, he gives us an insight of what it of this the POQO PAC dynamic. He gives us an insight, but I think one of the things that became a problem, especially because of scholarship, is the fact that because abantu ababhalayo bathanda ukwenza umgca wempuku, umuntu akafuna uba wrong, ufuna because kukhona what is already been written, and therefore let us follow that process, even if that process is wrong. And therefore that constant repetition that UPOQO was a militia of the PAC, was therefore embedded in the popular consciousness of the members and the people of South Africa, Africa, and the world. And therefore, people began to think that and accepted that as if it is the correct interpretation. But when you read and you zoom seriously in the understanding, you do not see that the POQO was a separate entity. And this confirmation does not only come from the Snyman Commission, but also it comes from the very same people who were members of the PAC at the time, but the name PAC could not be utilized overtly. It was a name that was banned. It was a banned organization. And therefore, they were able to utilize a name that was overtly acceptable, which was UPOQO. And the name UPOQO was not banned in 1960 up until 1990. It was never banned. So it does make sense for me as a reader of these archives that, yes, UPOQO could not have given, let me say, UPOQO could not have been a separate entity. But what you could refer to, something that could have been some form of a separate or an auxiliary, let's use that word, an auxiliary. You can say the task force or the task forces were the auxiliaries of the PAC of UPOQO, which therefore these task forces after 1961, when the adoption of the military strategy to utilize or to fight militarily as the PAC people had adopted, then they were the conduit, they were the drivers of that particular struggle. So I want on the 61st year, I'm challenging anybody who has got a different view or a further interpretation on these three questions, I might have not told the stories properly because we are only having an hour. I might not have told the story in the proper sequence, but the thesis questions that I wanted to prove were three: to say that APLA did not metamorphose from POQO. The second one is that POQO was not a separate entity from the PAC, but it was the PAC. And thirdly, that the idea that POQO was a separate entity, was a militia, does not come from the PAC, it comes from outside. And therefore, I'm making this conclusion to say, if the people who are engaging on the heritage and legacy of APLA have to make a legacy, they have to build a legacy and say that the APLA did not metamorphose from POQO, but from the task force. If they have to make that, if that thing is that important, it has to be given a specific direction where it emanates from. It emanates because those task forces were led by a political program. In the PAC understanding, they talk about the politics lead the gun. So the task force was led by the politics of the PAC. POQO itself, which majority of members who implemented the decisions of the PAC to embark on the armed struggle, were members of the task force, majority. And majority of these members of the task force were trained in basic drill, use of pistol, but most of them, they used rudimentary arms, pangas. They would do knives, they would sharpen things, as we have learned with the information that we got at the Pan-African Motors in Duncan Village or in East London. So as we go forward in engaging on the 61st year of APLA, the heritage itself or the legacy itself, I have not spoken about their participation in their training in China, in other areas, in Nigeria, wherever. I have not engaged on that. I only wanted for us to first look at this particular moment of the metamorphosis of APLA. And APLA at no material times does it metamorphoses from POQO, because POQO itself is the actual organization. So the organization gave birth to the task force. The task force metamorphosed into a conventional military wing or a guerrilla military wing. Yes, if you want to refer, I would say, which most people to avoid confusion, if you want to refer to that particular period, maybe 1962, 1961 to 1963, maybe you can say that it was a POQO period, because that particular period was known in the popular discourse as POQO was metamorphosed straight into BS. Yeah, we understand. So you can use that, but I do not find it in the archives, in the sources, as to whether the PAC had a different organization that was called POQO. I do not find that. What I find is that POQO was PAC. But also what I find is that, especially in the Langa area, Mgashe argues that the military outlook, the overzealousness of the task force, of the younger generation, overtook the political direction, the auxiliary. It overtook the leadership, especially after the arrest of the leadership of the party after 1960. So that particular overtaking could have given rise to this thinking and this understanding that there was a different militia group that was called POQO. But if you read extensively, if you look into the archives, as I have done, you are beginning to pick up that there's no such thing as a separate entity of the PAC to POQO. One, these are my conclusions. PAC was POQO, and the name POQO emanates from, there's different interpretations of it, but it emanates from three aspects. The sources are saying, one of them says, Sobukwe was asked to say, how are we going to separate this Congress from the Charterist Congress? They say, Tina Singama Africa POQO. Somebody said it, Ekwalam. The other source says, and there was a writer who said that at the time, because they kept on using the Amathiopia POQO, then they wrote and said, well, that organization, Yona Ingama Africa POQO, that is a second source. But also other people, Strauss, a European writer, who's actually written before Tom Lodge and correctly interpreted POQO to be a form of the PAC. He says that the name POQO, Africa POQO, was utilized even by the Africanist group when they were still in the ANC, pre the establishment of the PAC. So these are my conclusions. One, APLA did not metamorphose from POQO, but it metamorphosed from the Africanist Task Force. Two, the POQO is not separate entity from PAC, but it is the PAC because they used the name POQO to refer to the PAC as AMA Africa POQO. Three, we are therefore have made an understanding and a conclusion that this separation of POQO from the PAC does not emanate from the PAC itself, but it emanates from the later writings of Professor Tom Lodge, which has been followed by other writers as well, who have then engaged on this particular way of thinking. I just saw that there were two comments that I wanted to engage on. I see them. One, I see Tebogo Nakedi. He says, great delivery, Mo Africa. This clarity on how the PAC was structured is helpful. Thanks for that, Tebogo Nakedi. And also, I see there is on Atwell Kwankwa, I think he says, may you please then link the 11th of September in your thesis. What is the relation in your view, given that the PAC POQO, in your view, was formed in April? May you please then link the 11th September in your thesis. What is the relation in your view, given that the PAC POQO, in your view, was formed in April? So I think these are two questions. One, firstly, let's take the second question from Ukwankwa. He talks about, in my view, the PAC and or POQO, in my view, was formed in April. So then that the April aspect. So it was that hitting of what do you call this thing? Remember, then Jan van Riebeeck arrived is reported to have arrived on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th and 6th of April in 1652 in the southern tip of the continent. So the PAC was then established around that period. But then the second question for me is that I'm not sure how to raise this link of the 11th of September, Kwankwa. If you can help me out, because I have not made that link to show how does this 11th of September link up, especially in relation to APLA, the establishment of APLA as what you are raising as a conventional military army. I'm saying it as a conventional military army or as a guerrilla movement. So I'm not sure. Maybe you can help us before we can engage on this. I see also Paul Tsedi. So he says that the argument is apt, POQO. He says the argument is apt. POQO has always been PAC. I warned members of the High Command in the Free State that POQO cannot be divorced from the APLA. I'm not sure what does that mean, or the PAC. So he's actually, Paul Tsediso Modise is actually in agreement with the argument that I'm putting across, that the POQO has always been PAC. POQO is not separate. And he says that he has warned that maybe, and that Paul, you could help us in expanding our thesis in my dissertation to ensure how do we then embark further on this particular moment, because it helps us. And I'm just going to give it a minute or two to you, Comrade Kwankwa, so that you can please give us a link to this 11th of September so that we can be able to give to our viewers a good understanding as to what do we mean by how does, considering that the PAC was established in April, but then its conventional or its guerrilla wing was then established on the 11th of September. What could be the reason? He's back. Let us see. Here is this comment. If we are to be divorced from the narrative phrased by Lodge, as you argue, why must we run with the phrasing of Snyman? Okay, yeah. One, I think the emanation of this question is coming from why should we accept the phrasing of the European settlers? I think that's why should we accept that? We are not accepting the phrasing of Snyman per se, but we are using Snyman as one of the sources of confirming what was then confirmed by the acting president of the PAC, but also has been confirmed by the stalwarts, which are the primary sources, in this instance, the primary sources of the PAC. We don't take the thinking Yaga Snyman as cast in stone, but the people who provide us with a better understanding of what POQO is and what PAC is are the stalwarts of the PAC. But fortunately or unfortunately, the archives remember, I used not only one source. I referred to Snyman. I referred to Dr. Ali Hlongwane. I referred to, I did not refer to Ntate Philip Khosana, but I want to make mention of him as well. I referred to Ntate Mgashe. I referred to Ntate Shabalala Sipho. I referred to Ntate Ntlodip. I referred to majority of the stalwarts of the PAC who are actually the custodians of this knowledge. And also now, one of the veterans and the stalwarts of the PAC, Ntate Paul, is also saying the same thing that we have said. And I've seen going the rounds that people must not think that because Snyman said it, and therefore Snyman is the correct interpreter of this. But the structure of the PAC itself gave rise to the task force. But because of the circumstances at the time, you had to find, I think you had to find a way of dealing with the problems of the time. PAC is banned, is prohibited, and therefore, because it is prohibited, abantu abathetha isiXhosa, the Xhosa-speaking Africans in the Cape who are traveling most of the time as a task force from the Cape to the border region, which includes East London and Nqongwe, which they go to the Transkei, Queenstown and other areas. They always understood the organization as POQO, but the Northern Transvaal or the other areas which were non-Xhosa speaking, they were engaging on the PAC. They understood themselves as PAC. Comrade Sisa Petse is asking, according to your understanding, when was APLA founded? On the 11th of September. It was established on the 11th of September. It is correct. That one, I'm not disputing the establishment date, Sisa. I'm not disputing the establishment date. The 11th of September can be granted, is granted that it is the day when the PAC had accepted that it establishes what you would refer to as APLA, and that was done in 1968. In 1968, so the 11th of September is part and parcel of that. It is. There's no question about that. And thank you for that heads up again, Sisa. When you say, I agree with you, PAC has always been POQO since inception, and it means if therefore, Sisa, you agree with my thesis and with my conclusion, you are therefore saying that you probably disagree with Tom Lodge that POQO was a separate entity from the PAC. Thank you for that, sir, and I appreciate it. Again, I see now people are beginning to only start to converse with me at this moment, and I had promised that we are only here for an hour, but let us continue and take some of these comments. We appreciate them, by the way. Paul again comes and says, most members of the Bethal trial are still alive. He calls about Themba Hlatshwayo, Silo Matsobane, Kala. They can give a deeper meaning from the concept of forming a group, which was disguised group, which was to combat cattle thieves. This was to give chance to meet and strategize on attacks on whites and their settlements. Thank you for that input also, Dada Upol. Again, there is another question. Viewers, maybe we will have to further engage on this, but let me take this. Atwell is saying, how do we then interpret this? How do we interpret this? The PAC task force, the forerunner of its military organs, POQO and APLA, Mkashe, 2006, page 21. Let me go there to page 21. 2006. Let me just quickly see if I'm able to get this aspect. One, this is my view. This is my view. One of the nicest things about scholarship is that you can critique a scholar that is before you, and you can expand that particular argument. I think Utatum Mkashe might be incorrect in placing POQO as part of a military organ in that sentence. He's correct to say the PAC task force is the forerunner of its military organ, APLA, but not POQO. I think that's where the mistake is at. And I had made this submission and I had said it extensively that the problem of scholarship, sometimes majority of people in scholarship, they tend to not want to go against the grain. They tend to not want to go against the particular narrative that is dominant in the popular discourse, which is something that I am engaging on as a theoretician, political scientist, as a historian, and a philosopher. On my work, I'm trying to read things and give a counter narrative, and we can only interpret this aspect and say, when it comes to the aspect of POQO as a military organ, Ntate Mgaje is incorrect in this interpretation, because already POQO, we have made a conclusion that POQO was not a military organ of the PAC, but POQO was the PAC, and POQO is the PAC. So I think we should end it at that particular moment. We should end it at that. It is a conversation that we can further it on, especially with a group of people who are part and parcel of these generations, who can engage us further and rectify us where we are wrong, and agree with us where we are not wrong. But in the main, I want to thank everybody who has taken part to be part of this conversation, and I'm therefore hopefully saying that those that are watching with us, if you are watching, I know Comrade Sisa is in Europe. Can you ask your friends and colleagues that other side to subscribe into our YouTube channel? Can you ask anybody, anyone who is your friend at your workplace, subscribe into our channel? It would be good. It would be nice to further have a greater following. Thanks, Kwangwa. You say it is an interesting conversation which must be taken further. So please, guys, please, viewers at home, make sure that you follow us. I want you to follow Pont De Politique. We rely on you. Here is the YouTube link at Pont De Politique. Subscribe. It is free of charge, so that we can be able to continue with this work. If you are also looking for us, we are on Twitter, and we are also on Facebook at Pont De Politique, and also on Instagram, and lastly on TikTok. And I hope that this was helpful. This was a helpful conversation, and I hope that those generations who have been part and parcel of the PAC over the years would then take this thing further. I'm concluding with this conclusion. One, the APLA did not metamorphose from POQO, but it metamorphosed from the PAC task force. Two, PAC has always been POQO, and POQO has never been separate from the PAC. Three, and lastly, it has always been that this understanding that POQO was a separate militia of the PAC did not come from the PAC, but it comes from the outsiders, and one of them is Professor Tom Lodge. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us. Umtungwa, Uyengwayo, Undima, Umalinge, Unkumbuzo, Unkome Bomvu, uyabulela kakhulu for being part and parcel of this conversation. I'll see you again next week as we further engage on our Heritage Month discussion. Makube njalo. Enkosi, Camako.